So let me give you an overview of what we are going to create in this video. I have created 5 examples, of which every example that comes is an additional of the previous example. So the first example we are going to create is this slider. This slider has a defined height. It also has these custom buttons. When you click these custom buttons, you can see that there is an effect. A fade effect has been applied to this slider. And in this video, I'm also going to show you how to create this fade effect. The second example, I'm going to show you how you can add a pagination to your slider. By default, Swiper.js doesn't come with this type of pagination. But I'm going to show you how you can create these custom paginations, and if you click them, they will be switching from one slider to another. The third example is going to be an additional to the second example. For this example, what we will do is to disable these navigation buttons on mobile screens. So if I reduce the width, you can see now we don't have the navigation buttons. The assumption is someone who is using a mobile device uses their hand to swipe from one slider to another. We are going to move on to the fourth example. And in this example, I'm going to show you how you can create more than one sliders per view. So you can see in this case, we have 3 sliders per view. I'm going to show you how you can create this effect. For the final example, I am going to bring everything together and also show you how you can make your sliders responsive. So if we try to minimize the width of this slider, you can see that it's responding according to the width. So we had 4 sliders per view, but now we have 3. And if I keep reducing it, you can see now we'll have 2. And one interesting thing is that as we are shifting or reducing the width, you can see that even the width here is changing. So if I go down, you can see the width is also reducing in size. Now, if I go down to 1 slider per view, you can see this is for the mobile screens. This is what we're going to create in this video. If you feel like this is interesting, then let's go ahead and get started with the first example. The goal of this example is to achieve this. The first thing we need to achieve is this custom navigation, but we also want to add the effect fade. So in here we have this basic Next.js page. This is the output of this page. So if I land this page, I save it and I refresh, this is what is appearing on the output. The first thing we need to do to get started and set up our Swiper.js is first of all to do a number of imports. The first import that we're going to do is for Swiper and Swiper slider. So we are going to import Swiper and Swiper slider from Swiper/React. And because we're going to use navigation in this example, we are also going to import navigation. Another thing we're going to import is the CSS for navigation. The reason why we're doing this is because this is a module in Swiper. So if we want to use navigation, then we have to import it, but also we have to import its CSS. So I'm going to go ahead and import the CSS for navigation. Don't forget to also import the main Swiper CSS. Without this, nothing will work. And lastly, I'm also going to import the Swiper fade, the effect fade, and its CSS. So effect fade and navigation, these are modules in Swiper. So we can also just put them together. So I'm going to delete this. Now the last thing I'm going to import is the image from Next.js. I'm importing this because we are going to use images in this project. So if you remember very well, after installing Swiper.js, I also copied this project from Swiper documentation. And from this project, you can see that after we've imported Swiper and Swiper slider plus Swiper CSS, what we need to do is to call Swiper, and then inside Swiper, we can have the Swiper slides. So each Swiper slide is a slide on its own. So this is the same concept we are going to use in our example. The only difference is what I'll do here, I'll create an array of images, and inside our application or inside our component function, I will have a map function to loop through this array of images. Now I'll go ahead inside our DV, our main DV, and create Swiper component, and inside this is where I'll add a Swiper slide. Inside this Swiper slide, I want to have an image. So what I'll do is I'll say image. So inside the source, inside the image, we'll have a source attribute, and each source attribute will take the link of the image in here. So for that to work, what we need to do is have a map function here, and I'll say images dot map, and inside here we'll have the image, which is the image URL, and we also have an index. This will be a unique index that comes with the map function by default. Don't forget to add return here. Inside the return is where I'm going to add our Swiper slider. It's Swiper slide. So here is where I'm going to add our Swiper slide. And inside the Swiper slide, the map function requires me to add a key attribute. And for the key attribute, I'll just say index, because this is a unique number. And then for the source, I will have image. Another thing I need to add is the auth attribute. For the auth attribute, I'll just say example. I'll just say example slide. This should work without any problem. So let's save it and see what happens. Now we have a problem. This is a React.js, a Next.js specific problem, or I should just say maybe a React problem. So what it says is the image component requires us to add width and height attributes. So for my Swiper projects, what I like to do is I like to have this as fill. So what fill says is I will take the height of the parent component. Now, by default, Swiper takes the height of the child component. So it laps around the child component. So what I'll do is to specify the height here. So I'll say H96, which is 384 pixels, and then I'll come inside my Swiper and say the height should be full, which is 100%. Instead of taking the height of the Swiper slide or the image inside here, it should take the height of the parent, of the height specified on the parent here. The reason I like to do this is because with this, you can be able to change the height however you want to. For example, I can say I want this image to fill the whole screen. So I can just say H screen. So this way it makes it easier for you to customize the height of your swiper or swiper slides. So you can see the image appears squished. To solve that, what I can do is I can just come inside here, add a class name and say object cover. So this will give us an image that looks better than what we had before. But for our example one, we need to have our height as 96 here, which is 300 and something pixels. So this is what we want. The next thing we want is to have the navigation icons on our site here. So let's do that for now. Okay, so right now it's time for us to add the navigation. So like I said, first of all, what we need to do is to import the module, of which we've done that already. The next thing we need to do is to add the configurations here. Now, for every module that we add, we need to add it inside a list under this modules attribute. So what I would say is pagination. Okay, not pagination, but navigation. And then after we've done this, I also need to add another attribute for navigation. So by default, this will just take the default configurations for navigation. So let's see what the default configurations for navigations look like. Now you can see we have navigation buttons inside here. Let me just refresh it. And you can see that we have these navigations, which are the navigations that we're gonna change in this video to make them look like this. But first of all, let's add the effect fade. So effect fade is also a module for swiper slides or for swiper JS. So we've imported it. The next thing we need to do is to add it here. So I'll add effect fade, and then I'll also come down here and say effect, and then it will be fade. So I'll refresh my application again, and now we can see that we have this fade effect. So another thing I want to do here or show you is that you can see after hitting the end here, we cannot show any slides in that direction, but we can go this direction. But after we also hit the beginning of the slides, we cannot click for any more slides. But we can change that effect by adding loop. So I can come here and say loop, and it should be equal to true. So if loop is true, then the sliders will keep on moving without stopping whenever you hit the end of the sliders or at the beginning. So let's move on and add pagination to our sliders. So to add pagination, since pagination is also a module for Swiper.js, you can see the list of all the modules you can add in their documentation. So I'll add pagination, and then I also need to import the CSS for pagination for this to work. Once I've added the CSS, I need to come here and include the module, so it will be pagination. And then after that, I also need to come here and add pagination. Once I've done this and refresh this, you see we now have this pagination. So by default, it doesn't look like this, but I remember that I added some CSS, which I'm going to add in the near future. But for now, let's remove it and hit save. And these are the default pagination. By default, the pagination bullets are not clickable. So if you want to make them clickable, what we can do is add an object, and inside this object, we can add clickable and set it to true. So this will make the pagination bullets clickable, like so. Okay, so we have solved our problem. Now we have navigation buttons. Now we also have the pagination bullets. The next thing we want to do is to make these custom. Okay, so for this example, we want to have our pagination buttons like this, and then our pagination buttons like this. I will leave the bullets here for the example number 3. That's where we're going to change the bullets to custom. But for this example, let's make these navigation buttons custom. Okay, so for now, let's talk about navigation. But before I do that, let me just show you how you can take advantage of this great documentation that Swiper.js has provided. So if you go here, you can basically select which documentation you want to use. If you're using Vue.js, you come here. If you're using React, you come here. This is just a new feature they've added, which is called Swiper element, and they are encouraging us to migrate to that. But in this video, I'm not using Swiper element. And then another thing you can also come here is the Swiper core. That is where I'm going to go. And then another cool thing that you can also find on this documentation is the demos. These demos are very useful because you can come to them, see how this swiper or the slider appears, and then you can see how they've actually created it by just clicking the platform that you're using. If you're using React, you click here. What we want here is to go under modules. You can see under modules, we have so many modules that comes with the library. So what I want to do is come on navigation. Since we want to add a custom navigation. So let me draw your attention to these two. So next EL or next element says is a string with CSS selector or HTML element of the element that will work like the next button after click. So for the element that is gonna work like the next button needs to have the ID, and we can specify the ID. And the same as the previous element or the previous button should have an ID, and we can specify that ID. So that's what I'm going to show you in this example. Okay, so to do that, what I'm going to do is under navigation here, I'm also going to add an object, and with this object, I'm going to add the previous element. I'm going to give it the ID. So it will be, I'll just call it previous btn. And if you're confused right now, just wait a moment and let me show you how this works, and I think you'll get it. For the next button, I'll give it an ID of next btn. And then what I need to do is just come at the bottom of our swiper or anywhere I want, but I like to have it at the bottom of my swiper, and I'll tell you the reason why. But you can position it at any position that you want, and it will work as long as you've provided the ID. So let me show you how to do that. First of all, I'm going to create a separate div here, and inside this div, I'll add two divs as well. One for the next button and the other one for the previous button. Okay, so we have these two divisions, and what I'll do is I'll just add some CSS to this. And what I want is, first of all, to just have a width of full. Let's just work with this first, and let me show you what's happening here. So for this division, I'll give it the following classes. Okay, let's first of all start by working with these two divisions, because this division will carry our our previous pattern, and this division will carry our next pattern. What I have to do is to add the ID that I specified above here as previous btn or next btn. So I'll add for the previous btn, for the previous pattern, the ID is previous btn. I'll also add an ID here, and this should be next btn. Okay, let me just add some style. So after that, I'll refresh the page and you can see the changes we've made. Okay, so for these are the classes that I've added. Remember, I'm using Tailwind CSS. So the first thing I've done is to give it a margin left of 24 pixels, and then when I hover around it, I want it to have a pointer icon. I've given it a height of 40 pixels and a width of 40 pixels. You can give it whatever you want. The reason why I've made it 40 pixels and 40 pixels is because once I give it a rounded full, then it will give me a full circle, and you will see this in a moment. I have aligned the item center because I've given them a flex attribute, and then I've also added justify center, so the element is at the very center. The child element inside this div is at the very center. Let me also add classes for this next pattern. The classes for this next pattern will be the same, except that I've added, instead of adding margin left 6, I've added margin right 6, but otherwise everything else is the same. So if I save this and refresh, you can see that still more nothing shows. And the reason why, it's because this is at the very bottom of this image. What I can do to position it better is, first of all, to give this a class of absolute. And then once I've done that, because I've given this a class of absolute, I need to give the parent division, which is this one, I need to give this a class of relative. Without this, the absolute class will not work. Now I've given it absolute, and then I want it to be positioned at the center. To do that with Tailwind CSS, I'll just say top 2/4, and this is 50%, this is 66, 50. I will have 50%. If I save this and refresh, still nothing. So what I can do to fix this is, first of all, to add a Z index. I'll just add a Z index of 10 just to be sure. Once I've done this, you can see now this thing is appearing here, but that's not how we want it to appear. So what I'll do is I'll give this a flex class so it appears side by side, and then I want it to one to appear this side and the other one to appear on the other end. To do that, I'll just say justify between. Once I've done that, oh, not justify center, but justify between, so it will give a space in between. So if I give the upper element a bg of, let's just say bg black, you can see this is the element. I will remove this, and you see that we have these we have these circles, but what I want is for us to have an icon inside this. Another thing is, what I would want you to do is to make sure that whenever you're doing this, you've disabled the navigation CSS, because sometimes you may face some issues, and just because the navigation CSS is in conflict with your own CSS. So what I like to do is to remove this CSS so that I don't have any issues. Moving on, now what I want to do is to add these icons. So how do I add these icons? The simplest thing is just for you to come inside here, and inside this div you can just add an SVG that points the other direction, and in the next div you also add another SVG. But what I'll do is I will use swiper icons, because I really like the idea of using icons whenever I can. So to do that, I will go to swiper icons website. Okay, not swiper icons, it's React icons. So I'll go here, and this is the link. They say all I need to do is to install these React icons. So I'll go ahead and install that. Let me just disable this and install this. I've already installed it, so it will just tell me that you've already installed this, blah blah blah, but I just want you to see how I'm doing it. And then as it installs, let me show you how you can import the icons. The documentation explains very well how you can import the icons, but you can just search for the icon that you want. In this case, I searched for this arrow back and arrow forward icon, which I'm going to use at the bottom here. So here I'll just add the arrow back, and then inside here I'll just add the arrow forward, and this should solve. Let's just refresh and see. Okay, so what we need to do is to learn the application again. Now you can see we have these icons, and it looks really great. It really looks great, and we've achieved our first objective. Now we can move on to the second example. But before we go, let me just format this document so it looks good. And this is our document. Okay, so for assignment number 2 is for us to add these custom paginations. And you can see that these are the paginations that comes by default with Swiper.js. I'm going to show you how you can add these custom paginations. So let's go into our code. The first thing we need to do is come under pagination, and what we have to do is to specify one thing, and that thing is the okay, so let's go to our code. So to get our pagination working, now this is what we have. To get our custom pagination working, there are two things that we need to do. The first thing, we have to specify the class where we want to have our pagination bullets. So to do that, you have to, okay, first of all, let's add a comma here, and then we need to add this L attribute. Inside this, we need to add the CSS class for our pagination bullets, and these are the pagination bullets. So let's specify the class where we want to put these. So what I'll do is I'll say, let me add my pagination bullets. By default, it's called swiper pagination. So I'll add this class here, and then after that I can just go to the position where I want to have my paginations, and then add the div with a class swiper pagination. So since I want to have my pagination here, I will just say, I'll just create another div, and then this div needs to have a class of swiper pagination. Let me just copy this. And that's it. That's all you have to do. That's all you have to do. Of course, we are going to do a few things still more, but this is the main thing that you have to do. Specify the position. Once you've done that, you can see it has disappeared. So what you can do now, since it has disappeared and it's at the bottom, so what you have to do now is to add a few classes. Let me just add a few classes and show you so to make it appear, first of all, I'll add a Z index. Just to be sure, I'll just add a Z. I can add a Z index of 10. This should work. And you can see now we have the swiper slides back at the top, just because we've added the Z index. Another thing I can do is now I have to disable the pagination CSS, because if I don't, then my styling will be in conflict with the styling here. If you want to see what I'm saying, then let's just continue without me disabling the CSS first. So what I'll do is I will also add a justify. Let me just copy the classes and put them and explain what I'm doing. I'll also add these classes. Let me remove the Z index since we've provided it already. So I've added a justify center, and these centers, since this is a flex, it has a flex class. Okay, I need to have a flex class here. Flex. Okay, so first of all, I've given it a Z index, and then I give it a justify center, so it will center our elements vertically and then horizontally, and then I've also given it a space of a space x4, which will give us a certain space between the pagination bullets. I've given it a bottom of 0. The reason for doing this is because I want this to be positioned absolute. So you can see I have an absolute position, so I have to specify where exactly I want it. Since I want it at the bottom of this main division, I've added a bottom 0 and then a py of 4 just to give us enough space, and then it has to be full. On hover, I want it to have a pointer, and this is just a flex class. Once I've done this and save it, you can see it has applied some of these CSS classes, Tailwind CSS classes. So right now, here is where you need to understand very clearly. So because we want to target these pagination bullets, first of all, let me inspect this. If I inspect this pagination bullet comes with these two classes. So if I inspect this, you see that, let me do this. You see that this is the main division that we provided, which is the swiper pagination, which is this. So basically this is an empty div, but what we so you can see this is an empty div, but by providing this swiper class or swiper pagination class, what we have said to Swiper.js is I want you to add all the bullets inside this division. So now every span inside this, or every bullet, has these classes: swiper, pagination bullet, swiper, pagination bullet, and the active bullet has this swiper, pagination bullet active. So if we want to change how this looks, then we need to change how these classes are styled. So to do that, what I'll do is I'll go to my, since I'm using Next.js, but if you're using regular React, or you're using maybe Vue or whatever, all you need to do is just go to your CSS files, and then you need to, let me do this. Okay, and then you need to add CSS for, specify your own CSS for these two classes. The first one is the swiper pagination bullet. This is normal for every bullet because every bullet has this swiper pagination bullet. Now what I've done here, I've said my bullets should have an H of 4, which is 16 pixels width, and W4, which is 16 pixels width and height. It's just a square. And then I've added a rounded full just to make them more rounded, or to have a full rounded circle. And then I've added a flex, justify center, item center. These are just general styles. You can do whatever you want. And then I've added a text white just to make my pagination, anything inside here, white. I can remove it since I think I'm not going to need it. But I've added a background of black. So now for the active pagination, what I've done is I've added bgled, a text white, but now you can see that the text white is given an important class. Since we are not going to have any text inside it, I'm also going to remove this. I've added a link of 2, and then the link should be white, just to make it more visible as the active bullet. Now if I save this and refresh, you can see that our styles have been applied, but this is not what we are looking for. This is not, trust me, this is not 16 pixels. This is not 16 pixels width or 16 pixels height. So to fix that, what I need to do is to disable now the swiper CSS for pagination, because this is what is in conflict with our main CSS. If I save this, you can now see that now I have the style that I want. One thing is, inside here I've added a bgled of 700, but you can see the active bullet doesn't have a bgled. Just because we have specified a bg black here, our swiper will take this class. If we want to for this class to be visible or to show its effects, then I need to make it important. Once I've done that, you can see that now it has changed. Any active class has a bg of lead. Guys, that's how you make your custom pagination. These custom pagination bullets can be changed however you want them. So feel free to change, play with it, and do whatever you want to make your pagination bullets very interesting or visually appealing. Okay, so we've come a long way. But if you're still here, I am very excited that you are. If you're enjoying this content, feel free to subscribe to my channel. By doing that, you help support us, and our content can also get to a lot of people who are looking for similar content like this one. Let's move on to example number 3. So for example number 3, what we want to do is just to make it responsive a little bit. For mobile screens, we want the side navigations to disappear. The reason we are doing this is because we assume that everyone who is using a mobile device uses their hand to swipe to the left or to the right. So that's the reason we are going to remove these navigation buttons on mobile screens and just give the space to the image to be able to show off. To do that, this is the simplest thing we're going to do in this video. All we have to do to achieve that is just give this a class of hidden. And if you're saying, what is that? This is the div that contains all our swipe and navigation. So the parent div for this is what we are giving a hidden class on mobile screens. And then we're going to say md flex. So for any screen like tablets and whatever laptops, it should appear. So this is how you do that. This is Tailwind CSS, but I know you will find a way to do this with normal CSS. It's not that difficult. So if we've done that, you can see now, let's go to our example here, the main project, and inspect, and you can see that the navigations have disappeared. So that's it for example number 3. Let's look into example number 4. My friends, this is where things starts to get interesting. Now we have more than one slider per view. To do this, this is one of the simplest things you can do. Let me show you how you can achieve this. To achieve this, what you need to do is I'll go to our project, and all you have to do is just give it another attribute which is called sliders per view. Sliders per view, and just indicate the number of sliders you want to have. So in this case, I've said sliders per view should be 3. Let's see what happens. You can see nothing happens, and maybe you are wondering, why is that so? It is because by lieu of this sliders per view is, for example, if you want to have let's say 2 sliders per view, then you have to make sure that the number of images or sliders in that swiper component are 2 times the sliders per view. So for example, if we have 2 here, then we should have here, it should have 4. If we have 4 images here, this should work. If we have 3 sliders per view, then we need to have at least 6 images for it to work properly. So what I'm going to do, you can see right now, this is not working, and we may feel like we have a certain problem. So let me just add more images to this, and we can see how that responds. So I have added 3 more images, and let's save and see. Sliders per view 3. What could be the issue here? Okay, so you can see that we've added 3 sliders. We have added 3 more sliders. That makes it 6 sliders, and we were hoping that this should work, and it's not working. So you may be wondering, what's the issue there? So the issue here is we added this effect fade, and by I don't know why Swiper.js doesn't allow these two to go together. So if I remove this effect fade and refresh this, you see that now it's working. So if you're having let's say more than one slider per view, then you need to remove the effect fade. And I can also, since I'm not using it, I can also remove it here. And if I save it, you can see now we have 3 images per view. Now another thing I can do, I can just add some spacing here. To do that, I will say space between and just add, I'll just make it 20. And now you see that we have 3 sliders per view, and then we have space here in between the sliders. If I minimize the width, you can see that the images don't appear, they appear okay, but you can see that they are very cropped, and this could not be the style that you want maybe for your application. So that's why I included example number 5 to give you the steps you can do to make sure that your sliders are responsive. Okay, now here we are at the very end of our tutorial, and here we're going to talk about making these sliders responsive. And the way we achieve that with Swiper.js is by using what we call breakpoints. So let me show you how we use the breakpoints to achieve responsiveness. So the first thing we are going to do here is, first of all, we are going to add what we call breakpoints. So for the breakpoints, I will focus mainly on 3 breakpoints. The first breakpoint that I'll focus on is 640, and 640 is for most of the times tablets. Okay, so for the tablet, I want to have the slides per view, of, let's make it 2, and then I also want to have space between of, let's just make it 10. And then another breakpoint I'll focus on is the 1024. This is mostly for laptops. So for laptops, I want to have sliders per view of 3, and then have a space between of 20. And then for maybe desktops, which is 1280, I want to have the slides per view of 4, and then the space between of 30. Now for mobile screens, because this is mobile first, for mobile screens I have the sliders per view of 1, and I'll remove the space between. So let's look at that. If I start to make this responsive, you can see now I have 2 here, and then here I have 1, and if I keep on increasing it, I have, okay, let's do this. I have 3, and then I have 4. And then if we come to this big screen, you can see that now we have 4 images per view. This is everything I prepared in this tutorial, and I will cover more extensively on this topic. So you can come back to my channel and check for some other topics on Swiper slider, because I believe that I'll cover more extensive on this topic in the near future. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you've reached this far. I hope that this information was helpful to you. Otherwise, I really appreciate your time. Thanks.